Long ago, people did not think about this the way we do now. They lived with it quietly. If you are listening at night, tell me where you are and what time it is. As the story continues, the pace remains slow and unhurried. There is no rush, only the quiet passing of time. You may listen closely, or simply let the sounds fade as the night gently moves forward. Night arrives again without announcement. It does not bring anything new with it. It brings the same quiet it always has, the same slowing of movement, the same soft release of attention. People long ago understood this rhythm well. They did not mark it. They lived inside it. By this point in history, dreams were no longer discussed as separate events at all. They were folded into sleep so completely that speaking of them felt optional. Dreams were understood less as things that happened and more as a condition the mind passed through while resting, like warmth spreading gradually. Without Edgar's, people noticed that when the body finally stopped resisting the day, the mind followed. Thoughts lost their order. Concerns loosened. Dreams appeared not as stories, but as drifting awareness. Images came and went without effort. They did not ask to be followed. This was not described as mystery anymore. It was familiarity in these later periods. People felt that the mind had layers, not layers to be studied or counted, just layers felt through experience. The outer layers stayed busy during the day. The inner layers waited. At night, the outer layer quieted, and the inner layers stirred slightly. Dreams moved through those inner spaces slowly. No one tried to map this movement. Mapping belonged to daylight. Dreams did not respond well to structure. When people tried to watch them closely, they slipped away. This taught a quiet lesson. Attention changed things. Rest required letting go. So people stopped trying to observe their dreams directly. They trusted the process instead. In homes where nights were long and uninterrupted, sleep deepened naturally. Dreams became less visual and more atmospheric. A sense of motion, a feeling of distance, a gentle awareness without form. These dreams were rarely spoken of because there was nothing to describe, and yet they were not empty. They left behind calm. This calm became the measure of a good night. Not images, not meaning, just ease. People noticed that even difficult days could end gently if sleep was allowed to arrive without expectation. Dreams seemed to absorb some of the day's weight, not by resolving it, just by holding it loosely until it softened. This understanding made people patient with themselves. They did not demand clarity from their minds at night. They did not judge the content of dreams. Judgment belonged to waking hours. As belief systems grew more complex, dreams quietly refused complexity. They remained simple in experience, even if words about them grew elaborate. The actual dreams stayed the same: brief, fluid, unstable. This contrast reminded people that explanation was not the same as experience. Dreams were experienced, not mastered. In some traditions, it was said that the mind returned to a more natural state during sleep, a state it remembered from before rules, before language, before effort. Dreams were traces of that return, not messages, just signs that the mind had stopped trying to be useful. This idea felt restful. It suggested that usefulness was not required at all times. People carried this feeling into waking life without realizing it. They became slightly more forgiving of distraction, slightly less anxious about unfinished thoughts. Dreams had shown them, quietly, that not everything needed to be completed. At night, when the body lay still, the mind no longer hurried. Dreams followed that pace. They slowed everything down. Scenes unfolded without direction. Events dissolved before they ended. There was comfort in this lack of resolution. It matched the way sleep itself worked. Sleep did not finish anything. It paused everything. Dreams were pauses within pauses. As the night continued, people drifted through these inner movements without noticing transitions. There was no clear moment when a dream began, no clear moment when it ended. Everything blended into rest, and by morning, whatever had passed through the mind had already settled, not stored, not recorded, just settled, like dust after movement. Stops. People rose without needing to remember anything. They trusted that the night had done what it needed to do. Dreams had moved where they needed to move. Nothing more was required. As this understanding settled more deeply, people became even less interested in the edges of dreams. They no longer tried to notice when one began or ended. Sleep was experienced as a single, long movement, and dreams were simply part of that movement, no more separate than a change in breathing or a shift in position during the night. People noticed that when sleep was uninterrupted, dreams seemed to lose shape. They became less like scenes and more like sensations. A sense of floating, a sense of distance, a sense of being present without needing to act. These were not described often because description required effort. An effort felt out of place at night. In this period, dreams were rarely spoken of as images. They were spoken of, if at all, as states. Someone might say they slept deeply, or poorly, or restlessly. The dream itself did not need to be mentioned. It was understood to be folded into the quality of rest. This way of thinking simplified nights. It removed curiosity that could disturb sleep. When people stopped waiting for dreams, sleep arrived more easily. The mind followed the body without resistance. Dreams, when they came, arrived quietly, without needing attention. People also noticed that dreams did not follow the same rules every night. One night might be full and heavy, another might feel almost empty. This inconsistency was accepted as natural. Days were inconsistent too. Expecting uniform nights would have felt unrealistic as time passed. The idea grew that dreams were not experiences meant to be carried forward. They belonged to the night in the same way darkness did. You did not take darkness with you into the morning. You left it behind without thought. Dreams were treated the same way. This belief reduced attachment. People did not try to hold on to pleasant dreams. They did not fear unpleasant ones. Everything was temporary by design. In quieter households, the night itself was considered the most important part of rest, not what happened within it. The long stretch of stillness mattered more than any passing image. Dreams were secondary, almost incidental. They were signs that sleep had reached a certain depth, nothing more. Some people noticed that when life became louder or more demanding, dreams became simpler, not richer, simpler, as if the mind chose not to add complexity when it was already carrying enough. This observation was not written down. It was felt and then forgotten. For many, dreams became a kind of background motion, like the slow shifting of clouds that you only notice when you look up without purpose. They were there, but they did not ask to be watched. In later ancient thought, there was a growing respect for what could not be controlled. Dreams fit perfectly into this respect. They arrived without permission. They left without explanation. Trying to manage them felt unnecessary and even unwise. This attitude influenced us, how people approached sleep itself. They stopped trying to sleep. They allowed sleep to happen. Dreams followed naturally when the mind stopped pushing. People learned that effort disrupted rest. The more they tried to observe their inner world, the more restless it became. Letting go brought calm. Dreams responded to that calm by becoming quieter. Over time, dreams lost their identity as separate experiences. They became something like a texture of sleep, present but indistinct, like the difference between still water and gently moving water. Both were water. Dreams were movement within rest. As the night continued, the mind drifted through these movements. Without comment, nothing needed attention. Nothing needed memory. The body rested. The mind softened. Dreams passed through or remained distant. By morning, there was no need to ask what had happened during the night. The only question that mattered was simple and wordless. Was there rest or not? Dreams had already answered that in their own quiet way. As the night reached its deepest point, dreams became almost invisible. They did not disappear, but they blended so fully with sleep that noticing them would have required effort, and effort was no longer present. The mind had settled into a quiet state where awareness drifted without direction, and dreams moved through that space without leaving clear marks behind. People long ago sensed this depth without naming it. They felt it as a heaviness in the body and a widening stillness in thought. In that stillness, dreams were not stories. They were shifts, a turning, a soft change in feeling, something passing, then replaced by something even quieter. This was considered the most restful part of the night. Not because it was pleasant or meaningful, but because nothing was asked of the mind. There was no need to remember, no need to respond. Dreams here were not experiences to be noticed. They were simply signs that the mind had fully let go. When people spoke of sleeping well, this was often what they meant. A night so deep that nothing stood out. No images remained. No fragments followed into waking. The night had closed gently around the mind and opened again by morning without disturbance. In this way, dreams became less about content and more about absence. The absence of tension, the absence of effort, the absence of awareness that tried to hold on to itself. Dreams were part of that absence, not interruptions within it. People noticed that when life felt balanced, nights often reached this depth more easily. When life was unsettled, dreams stayed closer to the surface. But even then, there was no judgment. Shallow sleep was not failure. It was simply another state. The night adjusted as it could. Over time, people trusted that sleep would find its own level. They did not try to push deeper. They did not resist lighter rest. Dreams followed wherever sleep went. They adapted quietly, without complaint. This trust removed struggle from the night. Struggle belonged to daylight. At night, the mind was allowed to loosen completely. Dreams honored that permission by becoming softer, less distinct, easier to release. As dawn slowly approached, this deep state faded naturally. Dreams thinned. Awareness returned gradually. There was no sudden break, just a slow rejoining of the mind with the body and the world around it. People woke without feeling as though something had been taken from them. Nothing was missing. Even when no dreams were remembered, there was a sense of completion. The night had done its work. Rest had occurred. That was enough. In this way, long ago, dreams reached their quietest understanding. There were no longer signs to be read or experiences to be collected. They were gentle movements within sleep, present when needed, absent when not, always passing without demand, and as night gave way to morning once more, dreams retreated without trace, leaving behind only the steady calm of a mind that had been allowed to rest fully, without question, without effort, and without the need to remember. Night returns again, not as something awaited, but as something expected. It settles the same way it always has, slowly, without instruction. Long ago, people felt this return in their bodies before they thought about it. Shoulders lowered, breathing softened, attention drifted without effort. Sleep approached gently, and dreams followed when they chose to. By this stage in history, dreams had lost nearly all urgency. They were no longer asked to explain anything. They were not pressed into service as symbols or signs. They existed alongside sleep, moving quietly, doing little that could be named. People had grown used to the idea that not everything needed interpretation. In many places, there was a quiet understanding that the mind did its own work at night. Work was not the right word, exactly. It was more like settling, like water in a bowl slowly becoming still after being carried. Dreams were part of that settling, not because they solved problems, but because they allowed motion to slow naturally. People noticed that when they resisted sleep, dreams became restless. When they surrendered icily, dreams softened. This observation was not treated as advice. It was simply something noticed over time. The night responded better to ease than to effort. As communities aged, silence became more familiar. Evenings grew quieter. Artificial light was limited. Darkness lasted longer. In this extended quiet, dreams did not need to compete with stimulation. They unfolded slowly, sometimes barely forming at all. Many nights passed without any clear dream memory, and these nights were considered successful. The absence of dreams was no longer seen as emptiness. It was seen as depth, a sign that sleep had reached far enough that images were no longer needed. The mind had gone somewhere quieter than storytelling. People who woke from such nights often described a sense of fullness without detail. They felt restored without knowing why. No explanation was required. The feeling itself was enough. In this period, some began to feel that dreams were not experiences added to sleep, but expressions of sleep itself. Just as breathing changes during rest, so does thought. Dreams were thought in its most relaxed form, thought without direction, awareness without focus. This idea did not spread through teaching, it spread through living, through nights that passed smoothly, through mornings that arrived without heaviness. People learned by noticing how. They felt not by analyzing what they saw. When dreams did appear, They were often simple. Repetitions of walking, standing, watching. These actions did not lead anywhere. They did not resolve. They simply occurred and then faded. This lack of conclusion no longer caused concern. It felt appropriate. Sleep itself did not conclude anything. It paused, dreams became pauses, within pauses, a soft layering of rest. In households where several generations lived together, elders rarely spoke of dreams unless asked. And when asked, they often answered briefly, sometimes not at all. This silence was not ignorance. It was trust. Trust that dreams did not need guidance to do what they did. Children absorbed this attitude naturally. They learnt that dreams were safe because adults treated them as ordinary. Nothing alarming. Nothing special. Just something that happened when the lights were out. As belief systems shifted and philosophies evolved, dreams remained untouched by debate. They did not change with doctrine. They did not adjust to new ideas. They stayed consistent in experience. Even as explanations around them changed, this consistency made dreams reliable in a quiet way. No matter what happened during the day, the night would still arrive. Sleep would still come. Dreams would still drift through or remain distant. The pattern held people found comfort in that steadiness. It reminded them that some parts of life were not affected by effort, status, or understanding. Dreams belonged to everyone equally, not because they were important, but because they were inevitable. As the night deepened once more, thoughts slowed again. The mind loosened its grip. Dreams followed if they wished, and people rested inside that familiar rhythm, no longer asking what dreams meant, only allowing them to pass gently through the dark, as they always had. As nights continued in this steady way, people became less aware of dreams as moments and more aware of sleep as a whole. Dreams were no longer singled out. They were woven into the night so completely that separating them felt unnecessary. The mind rested, and whatever moved within that rest was allowed to move without comment. People noticed that the quietest nights often followed days that had been ordinary, not difficult, not exciting, just ordinary. On those nights, dreams rarely announced themselves. They passed like slow clouds, barely shaped, barely remembered. These were considered gentle nights. When days were unsettled, dreams sometimes hovered closer to waking. They felt nearer. Still, there was no urgency to examine them. Nearness did not mean importance. It only meant the mind had not fully settled. Yet, that settling would come later, or another night. This patience shaped how people related to their own thoughts. They learned that not everything needed attention right away. Some things softened on their own if given enough darkness and time. Dreams demonstrated this quietly, again and again. In these later times, dreams were rarely connected to fate. Fate belonged to stories. Dreams belonged to sleep. The separation felt natural. Stories required structure. Dreams dissolved structure. They did not point forward. They drifted sideways, or backward, or nowhere at all. People began to feel that dreams were closer to memory than to prophecy. Not memory as recall, but memory as atmosphere. The feeling of something that had been, lived before, without knowing when. Dreams carried that feeling gently, without explanation. This made them familiar, even when unclear. Familiarity reduced fear. Some believed that dreams helped the mind return to balance by revisiting emotions without context, fear without danger, joy without cause, sadness without loss. These feelings appeared and faded without consequence. This allowed the mind to experience them without holding on to them. This belief did not need proof. It felt true because it felt calming. Over time, people learned that even difficult emotions passed more easily through dreams than through waking thought. During the day, emotions demanded response. At night, they were allowed to move freely and leave. Dreams gave them space without judgment. This understanding changed how people approached rest. They stopped carrying the day into the night so carefully. They trusted that sleep would handle what they could not. Dreams were part of that handling, quiet and unseen. In places where the night was long and dark, people often woke briefly without opening their eyes. In those moments, awareness floated between sleep and waking. Dreams loosened. Thoughts had not yet returned. This space felt peaceful. Many people returned to sleep without realizing they had been awake at all. Dreams moved easily through these transitions. They did not need clear boundaries. They adapted without resistance. As generations passed, dream explanations became almost invisible. They were no longer spoken. They were lived. The way people lay down, the way they woke, the way they did not rush to interpret inner movement. All of this reflected a deep trust in the night. This trust was not dramatic. It was quiet and stable. It did not depend on belief. It depended on experience. Night after night, the same pattern repeated. Darkness, rest, dreams or their absence, morning. The repetition itself became the explanation. People stopped asking where dreams came from. The question felt unnecessary. Dreams came because sleep came. That was enough. As the night continued once more, thoughts slowed, the body settled. Dreams drifted through or stayed distant. And people rested inside that rhythm, familiar with it, comforted by it, allowing the night to pass without asking anything more of it. As the night moved toward its quiet center, dreams became almost indistinguishable from rest itself. They did not present themselves clearly. They did not form scenes that ask to be remembered. Instead, they passed as gentle shifts in awareness, barely noticed. Like a change in wind felt only on the skin, people long ago grew comfortable with. This softness, they no longer waited for dreams to appear. Waiting belonged to effort, and effort had no place in sleep. The mind was allowed to loosen completely, to drift without direction, to exist without needing to do anything at all. Dreams followed that permission. In this state, dreams were not experienced as stories. They were experienced as moments of presence without focus, a sense of being somewhere without knowing where, a sense of time moving without needing to measure it. These experiences did not invite description. Words would have felt too heavy. This quiet understanding made nights feel safe. Nothing unexpected was required to happen. Nothing had to be carried forward. Dreams did not interrupt rest. They blended into it, supporting it by allowing movement where stillness had grown too firm. People noticed that when dreams were left alone, they did not trouble the waking mind. A dream that was not examined dissolved easily. It left behind no tension. This taught a subtle lesson. Attention could create weight. Letting go allowed lightness. Over time, this lesson became part of how people lived. They carried less from night to day. They allowed thoughts to pass without attaching meaning to them immediately. Dreams had shown them that passing did not mean loss. It meant completion. In these later periods, dreams were no longer considered separate from the body. They were felt as bodily experiences as much as mental ones. A warmth, a heaviness, a release. The mind and body rested together without division. Dreams moved through both without distinction. This view required no explanation. It was felt in the ease of waking after a deep night. When the body rose without resistance and the mind followed calmly, that was enough evidence. Dreams had done what they needed to do, even if no one knew exactly what that was. As dawn approached, awareness returned slowly. Dreams thinned without effort. There was no sense of leaving something behind. Nothing was missing. The night had unfolded fully, even if it left no trace. People rose and entered the day without feeling changed or instructed. They did not expect dreams to guide them. They expected the day to continue, and it did. Dreams had belonged to the night. The night had passed. In this way, long ago, dreams found their quietest place. They were no longer mysteries waiting for answers. They were not messages or mirrors. They were movements within rest, appearing when the mind softened, disappearing when waking returned, and as night gave way once more to morning. Dreams withdrew without sound, without meaning that needed, leaving behind only the steady calm of a mind that had rested deeply, undisturbed, and at ease with not knowing. Night returns again, steady and familiar, like a path walked so often it no longer needs to be seen. Long ago, people felt the arrival of night not as a change, but as a settling. The world did not switch states. It softened. Sounds thinned. Movement slowed. Attention loosened its grip without being asked. Sleep followed this softening, and dreams followed sleep. By this time, dreams had become almost invisible within ordinary life. They were present, but not central, like background music that no one chooses but everyone lives with. People no longer thought of dreams as things that happened to them. Dreams were simply part of how the night passed. In these later periods, there was a growing sense that the mind did not stop at night. It changed its posture. During the day, the mind stood upright, alert, shaped by tasks and expectations. At night, it lay down. It rested. Dreams were what the mind looked like when it was no longer holding itself upright. This image felt right to many people. It did not require belief. It did not challenge anything else. It simply described a feeling that was already familiar. People noticed that when they stopped carrying the day with them into bed, sleep arrived more smoothly. Dreams followed without resistance. When worries were carried too tightly, dreams hovered closer to the surface. They were not harsher, just nearer. This nearness was not seen as a problem. It was simply part of how rest adjusted itself. Over time, people learned that dreams did not need help. They did not need preparation. They did not need interpretation. Waiting in the morning. Dreams were self-contained. They belonged entirely to the hours of darkness. Because of this, many people stopped trying to remember dreams at all. Memory was not required for dreams to do their quiet work. A dream forgotten by morning was not wasted. It had already passed through the mind while it was needed. This idea changed how mornings felt. People woke without searching their thoughts. For images, they did not ask themselves what they had dreamed. They asked only how they felt, rested or not, calm or heavy. That answer mattered more than any remembered scene. In some places, people described dreams as the mind turning over, not turning toward something, just turning the way the body shifts position during sleep. This turning prevented stiffness. It kept the inner life from becoming fixed. Dreams, in this sense, were movement for the sake of ease. This explanation did not erase older stories about dreams. It did not argue with them. Those stories remained, resting quietly beneath Delhi experience. But in ordinary life, dreams were no longer treated as messages waiting to be read. They were movements waiting to pass. People also noticed that as they aged, their relationship with dreams changed. Younger people often noticed dreams more. Older people noticed sleep itself. This shift was not explained as loss. It was understood as change. Attention moved where it was needed most. For elders, a night without dreams was not empty. It was full of rest, full of stillness. Dreams had done their work by staying out of the way. This acceptance shaped how people approached the end of the day. There was less anticipation, less effort. People lay down without expectation, trusting that whatever the night brought would be enough. As nights continued, this trust deepened. The mind learned that it did not need to remain alert. It could release itself fully. Dreams responded by becoming quieter, softer, less defined. They no longer interrupted rest. They supported it in this way. Dreams settled into their most ordinary role, not teachers, not warnings, not reflections, just signs that the mind had been allowed to loosen and move gently while the body slept. And as the night continued its slow passage, people rested inside that understanding, allowing sleep to take them where it always did, carrying dreams with it or leaving them behind, without concern, without urgency, and without the need to notice the difference. As this quiet trust became part of daily life, people found that nights required less preparation. There was no need to clear the mind or invite certain thoughts. Sleep arrived more easily when nothing was asked of it. Dreams followed the same rule. They came more gently when they were not expected to do anything at all. People noticed that. When they tried to think about dreams before sleeping, the night felt lighter but more restless. When they did not think about them, sleep deepened. This was not turned into advice. It was simply experienced enough times to be understood without words. In many homes, evenings ended without conversation. Lamps dimmed, movement slowed. The body recognized the signals long before the mind did. Dreams slipped into that, slowing naturally, without needing space to be made for them. By now, dreams were rarely connected to identity. A person was not defined by what they dreamed. Dreams were not evidence of character or intention. They were passing states, like weather moving through an open field. You noticed them while they were there, and then they were gone. This made dreams easier to accept. There was nothing to defend or explain. A strange dream did not say anything about the dreamer. A calm dream did not prove anything. Both were allowed to exist without judgment. In some traditions, people began to describe dreams as places the mind rested briefly before moving on. not destinations, just pauses. These pauses did not last long enough to be explored. They were felt and then replaced by the next moment of rest. This description felt accurate because dreams rarely stayed still. Even when they seemed slow, they shifted. A scene softened, a feeling changed. Nothing remained fixed. People learned that this shifting was not a problem. It was part of what made rest possible. Stillness, held too long, became tension. Dreams prevented that tension by allowing quiet movement. As nights continued, people became less likely to wake fully from dreams. Awareness floated instead. Dreams loosened without resistance. Sleep continued without interruption. This unbroken sleep was valued more than any remembered experience. Those who slept this way woke feeling balanced, not energized, not inspired, just even. This evenness was considered a sign that the night had passed well. Dreams had become almost invisible at this point. Not absent, just unimportant. They did not need attention to exist. They did not demand memory to matter. In waking life, this attitude influenced how people treated their thoughts. They became more willing to let thoughts pass without holding on to them. Dreams had shown them that passing did not mean disappearance. It meant completion. People noticed that when they carried fewer thoughts into the night, they carried fewer dreams into the morning. This was not seen as loss. It was seen as relief. As belief systems continued to shift, dreams remained steady. They did not reflect new ideas or new rules. They reflected rest. This made them reliable in a quiet way. Night after night, the same pattern repeated. Darkness arrived. Sleep followed. Dreams moved through or stayed distant. Morning returned. Nothing required explanation, and as the night continued once more, people lay down without expectation, trusting that whatever happened within sleep would remain where it belonged, in the dark, moving gently, without sound, without demand, and without the need to be remembered. As the night reached its deeper hours, dreams became almost entirely absorbed into rest. They did not present themselves as moments to be noticed. They existed as part of the night's weight, the same weight that settled into the body and held it still. People long ago felt this heaviness without naming it. It was simply the feeling of having fully arrived at night. In this depth, dreams were not images. They were not stories. They were shifts in comfort, in distance, in presence. A sense of being held somewhere without knowing where. A sense of time passing without shape. These experiences did not invite memory. They passed too gently to leave marks. People noticed that when sleep reached this place, waking felt easier. The body rose without resistance. The mind followed without delay. Nothing had been carried through the night that needed sorting. Dreams had already done what they needed to do by staying quiet. In these later times, there was a shared feeling that dreams were no longer separate from the night at all. They were expressions of sleep reaching its fullest form. When sleep deepened, dreams softened. When sleep remained light, dreams hovered nearer. This was not explained as cause and effect. It was simply observed. The night was allowed to take whatever shape it took. Some nights were shallow, some were deep. Both were accepted. Dreams adjusted themselves without complaint. They did not insist on being seen. People trusted this adjustment. Trust made rest possible. When trust was present, the mind stopped watching. itself, dreams responded by dissolving into the background. Awareness drifted without effort. As dawn slowly approached, dreams thinned even further. They did not end. They faded. There was no moment when one could say a dream stopped. It simply became lighter, less distinct, until it was no longer there. This fading felt natural. Nothing had been interrupted. Nothing had been taken away. The night had completed its movement. People woke without urgency. There was no need to remember, no need to interpret. The only thing that mattered was the quiet sense that rest had occurred. In this way, long ago, dreams reached a state of complete ease. They were no longer experiences to hold or release. They were movements within sleep that required no attention at all. They belonged entirely to the dark hours. When the dark receded, they receded with it. And as morning arrived once more, the night left nothing behind that needed explanation. Only the steady calm of a mind that had rested deeply, undisturbed by meaning, untouched by urgency, and content to let the unseen pass quietly on its own. Night comes back again, steady and unremarkable, like something that never truly left. Long ago, people did not think of night as a separate world. It was the same world, only quieter. Shapes softened. Distances grew uncertain. The body relaxed. Into this change without instruction, and the mind followed at its own pace. Sleep arrived not as an action, but as a release. Dreams followed in the same way. By this point in time, dreams were understood as something that belonged entirely to rest. They were no longer approached with curiosity or caution. They were simply accepted as part of how the mind behaved when it was no longer being used. This acceptance made nights feel familiar, even comforting. Nothing unexpected was supposed to happen. Nothing needed to happen at all. People noticed that the mind did not fall asleep all at once. Parts of it lingered briefly. Thoughts thinned. Awareness drifted. Dreams appeared in this drifting, not clearly formed, not clearly separate. They felt like motion rather than content, like something shifting position without needing to know why. This feeling was known through repetition, not explanation. Night after night, the same pattern unfolded. The body grew heavy, the mind loosened. Dreams came or stayed distant. Morning returned. The repetition itself became reassuring. It removed the need for interpretation. In these later periods, people rarely spoke of dreams as something seen. They spoke of them as something felt, if they spoke of them at all. A night could feel light, or deep, or unsettled. Dreams were folded into those descriptions, not separated from them. This way of understanding dreams made them less personal. A dream was not something that belonged to the self in a lasting way. It was something that passed through the self, briefly, like a thought that arrives and leaves before it is named. This made dreams easier to release. People noticed that when they tried to hold on to dreams, sleep became thinner. When they let dreams pass without attention, rest deepened. This observation was not treated as instruction. It was simply lived long enough to be trusted. As daily life became more demanding in some places, the night remained unchanged. Dreams did not respond to busier days by becoming more meaningful. Often they became quieter, as if the mind chose rest over display when it was already carrying enough. This quiet response was welcomed. It suggested that the night adjusted itself without help. Dreams did not need to compensate for the day. They only needed to accompany sleep in homes where Darkness lasted many hours. People often experienced long stretches of sleep without waking. Dreams moved through these stretches without interruption. There were no sharp boundaries. Awareness flowed smoothly from one state to another. This smoothness was valued more than any remembered image. People waking from such nights often felt steady, not inspired, not guided, just steady. This steadiness was considered the sign of a good night. Dreams had done what they were meant to do by not leaving disturbances behind. Over time, this understanding shaped how people approached the end of the day. There was less effort to resolve thoughts before sleeping. Unfinished things were allowed to remain unfinished. Dreams had shown that unresolved movement could soften on its own. This lesson extended quietly into waking life. People became more tolerant of uncertainty. They learned that clarity did not always arrive through effort. Sometimes it arrived through rest or not at all, and life continued anyway. As the night deepened once more, the familiar pattern returned. The body rested, the mind loosened. Dreams drifted through or stayed distant. Nothing was required. Nothing was asked, and people long ago rested inside that rhythm, trusting that the night would pass as it always had, carrying dreams with it or leaving them behind, without urgency, without explanation, and without the need to notice the difference. As nights continued to follow this familiar pattern, people felt less separation between sleeping and waking life. The two states leaned into each other gently, without a sharp boundary. Dreams belonged to this leaning. They appeared in the space where attention had not yet fully disappeared and had not yet returned. People noticed that when sleep came easily, dreams felt distant, almost unformed. When sleep came slowly, dreams lingered closer to awareness. Neither condition was preferred. Both were part of the night finding its own balance. In these later times, dreams were no longer expected to bring anything new. Novelty belonged to waking hours. Dreams returned to what was already known, but in softened forms. Familiar places, familiar movements, familiar feelings without clear cause. This familiarity reduced interest, and with it, concern. Some described dreams as the mind settling back into itself. During the day, attention stretched outward. At night, it folded inward. Dreams were part of that folding. They did not add information. They reduced tension. This reduction mattered more than meaning. People learned that when tension eased, sleep deepened. When sleep deepened, dreams became quieter. This cycle repeated naturally. There was no need to manage it. In daily life, people carried many unfinished thoughts. Night did not ask them to finish. Dreams allowed these thoughts to drift without conclusion. By morning, some had faded. Others returned unchanged. Either outcome was acceptable. This acceptance shaped how people spoke about dreams, when they spoke at all. A dream did not require a response. It did not need to be shared. Silence was a common reaction, and silence was enough. In some places, it was believed that dreams were a sign that the mind had stopped defending itself. During the day, the mind guarded against distraction. At night, it lowered those defenses. Dreams entered through that opening, not as intruders, but as natural movement. This belief did not make dreams important. It made them expected. People trusted that the mind knew how to rest without supervision. Dreams were evidence of that trust, not something that needed attention. As nights grew longer or shorter with the seasons, dreams adjusted without notice. They did not resist change. They reflected it quietly. Longer nights sometimes held more drifting awareness. Shorter nights often passed with little memory at all. Both felt natural. Over time, people stopped asking whether they had dreamed. The question felt unnecessary. What mattered was how the body felt upon waking. Heavy or light, rested or not. Dreams were only one part of that feeling, and not the most important one. In this way, dreams became almost transparent. They were present, but not visible. They moved through sleep without leaving impressions that needed to be traced. As dawn approached, awareness returned slowly. Dreams released their hold without effort. There was no sense of leaving something behind. Nothing was missing. The night had passed fully. People rose and continued their days without expecting dreams to guide them. Dreams had already done what they were meant to do by allowing rest to complete itself. And so, long ago, dreams remained quiet companions of the night, present without purpose, passing without demand, leaving behind only the steady calm of a mind that had been allowed to rest without question. As the night reached its later hours, dreams grew thinner still. They did not disappear all at once. They softened gradually, like sound fading as distance increases. People long ago did not notice the moment when dreams let go. They only noticed that morning arrived without effort. In this quiet, fading dreams were no longer experiences that could be separated from sleep. They were simply part of how rest completed itself. When sleep had gone far enough, dreams had nothing left to do. They loosened naturally and drifted away. People felt this not as loss, but as completion. The night had moved through all its stages without interruption. Nothing had been interrupted. Nothing had been forced. This smoothness was valued, even if it was rarely spoken of. In these later times, there was a sense that dreams did not belong to memory at all. Memory belonged to daylight, to repetition, to things that needed to be carried forward. Dreams belonged to the night, and the night did not keep records. It passed and left no trace by design. This understanding made people gentler with forgetting. Forgetting was not failure. It was the natural end of rest. A forgotten dream had fulfilled its purpose fully. People noticed that when they woke without memory, they often felt most balanced. The body felt settled. The mind felt clear, not sharp, just clear enough. Dreams had moved quietly in the background, smoothing something unseen. In these moments, people did not search inward. They did not ask what had happened while they slept. The absence of curiosity was a sign of trust. Trust that the night had done what it always did. As belief systems shifted and time continued forward, dreams remained unchanged in their behavior. They did not grow louder. They did not demand attention. They stayed exactly where they had always been, inside the rhythm of rest. People learned that even when life became uncertain, nights often remained steady. The body still lay down. The mind still loosened. Dreams still drifted through or stayed distant. This steadiness offered comfort without explanation. In households where worries were many, dreams often became quieter, not heavier, as if the mind chose silence over imagery when it was already carrying too much. This silence was welcomed. It meant rest had been given priority. As dawn lightened the sky, people stirred slowly. Awareness returned in small pieces. Dreams did not resist this return. They slipped away without sound, without leaving questions behind. People rose and moved into their days without thinking about what had passed in the night. Dreams had not asked to be remembered. They had asked only to move through and then go. And so, long ago, dreams completed their quiet role. Not as guides, not as messages, not as mysteries waiting to be solved, but as gentle movements within sleep itself. They arrived with rest. They left with waking. Nothing more was required. Night comes once more, not as an ending, but as a familiar return. It does not announce itself. It does not ask to be noticed. It settles the same way it always has, by lowering the pace of everything that moves. Long ago, people felt this lowering. In their bodies first. Muscles eased, breathing slowed. The world became quieter without disappearing. Sleep followed naturally, and dreams followed sleep, as they always had. By this final stretch of time, dreams were no longer something people tried to understand at all. They were not explained because explanation no longer felt useful. Dreams had been lived with for so long that they no longer raised questions. They had become part of the background rhythm of being alive, like hunger returning, like fatigue passing, like seasons changing without asking permission. People felt that. The night did not need to give anything back. It did not owe meaning. It did not owe clarity. Rest was enough. Dreams were simply part of how rest happened, not additions to it. They did not improve sleep. They did not interrupt it. They moved quietly within it, then disappeared. In these later times, there was a calm sense that the mind knew how to take care of itself when left alone. During the day, the mind was used. At night, it was allowed to stop being useful. Dreams appeared in that stopping, not as tasks, but as signs that effort had been released. People no longer waited to see what kind of dream might come. Waiting implied expectation, and expectation disturbed rest. Instead, they lay down without looking inward. They trusted the night to pass the way it always had. Some nights held faint impressions. Other nights held nothing that could be named. Both were accepted equally. A night without dreams was not empty. It was complete. A night with dreams was not special. It was ordinary. This ordinariness was comforting. It meant there was nothing to manage, nothing to interpret, nothing to miss. As people aged, this understanding deepened further. Sleep became more valuable than imagery. Rest mattered more than memory. Dreams faded naturally into the background. Not because they were lost, but because they were no longer needed to be noticed. Elders often spoke less about dreams than anyone else. Not because they had forgotten them, but because they had learned what did not need words. They had lived long enough to know that the night would take care of itself if left undisturbed. Children, watching this calm, absorbed it without being taught. They learned that dreams were safe because adults did not react strongly to them. Nothing alarming, nothing urgent, just something that happened when the lights were out. As belief systems rose and fell, dreams stayed the same. They did not change their behavior, They did not respond to new explanations. They remained steady in experience, even as words around them shifted. This steadiness made dreams easy to live with. They did not compete with waking life. They supported it quietly by allowing the mind to rest without direction. Night after night. This pattern continued. Darkness arrived. The body rested. The mind softened. Dreams passed through or remained distant. Morning returned. Life continued. There was no need to mark transitions. No need to explain what had happened. The cycle spoke for itself through repetition. As the night deepened again, thoughts loosened. Awareness thinned. Dreams moved gently, without form or demand. Nothing asked to be remembered. Nothing asked to be carried forward. And people long ago rested inside this familiar rhythm, not searching for meaning, not fearing the unknown, but trusting the quiet intelligence of sleep itself, allowing dreams to come and go as they always had, without urgency, without effort, and without the need to understand. As the night continued, people felt less and less distinction between themselves and rest. The body no longer felt like something to manage. It simply lay where it was, supported by the ground, supported by habit. The mind followed this simplicity. It stopped asking where it was going. It stopped checking itself. Dreams appeared only as faint movement within that quiet dot. In this stage of understanding, dreams were no longer something that happened inside a person. There was something that happened with a person, like night air moving through an open space. You did not contain it. You shared space with it briefly, and then it moved on. People sensed that the deepest rest came when even the idea of dreaming faded. Not because dreams were gone, but because attention had loosened completely. There was nothing left to notice, nothing left to hold. The mind had stepped aside and allowed sleep to take over fully. This surrender was not dramatic. It was gentle and ordinary. It felt like letting the head sink into a pillow without adjusting it again. Once settled, there was no reason to move. Dreams, in this state, were barely present. They did not form images. They did not stir emotion strongly. They were more like shifts in comfort, in warmth, in distance. A subtle sense of being somewhere safe and undefined. People did not try to remember these moments because there was nothing. To remember, memory required shape, and these dreams had none. They left behind only ease. In later years, people came to value this ease above all else. A night that passed quietly was a good night. A mind that woke without weight was arrested. Mind. Dreams had served their purpose by not leaving marks. This understanding softened how people thought about the mind itself. The mind was no longer something that needed constant direction. It could be trusted to quiet itself. Dreams were evidence of that trust, not something that needed control. When people lay down at the end of the day, they no longer felt the need to prepare themselves inwardly. There was no clearing, no sorting. The day was allowed to remain unfinished. Dreams would not resolve it, and they did not need to. Rest alone was enough. As darkness held the world, the mind drifted naturally into stillness. Dreams moved through or remained distant, unnoticed either way. There was no preference, no expectation. This lack of preference made the night smooth. Smooth nights led to gentle mornings. Gentle mornings led to days that were easier to carry. In this way, Dreams quietly supported waking life by staying out of its way. They did not intrude. They did not instruct. They allowed the mind to release effort fully and return rested. As the night reached its final hours, awareness thinned further. Dreams faded almost completely. Sleep became deep and even. Breathing slowed. Thoughts softened into silence. Nothing needed to end because nothing had begun sharply. The night simply continued being what it was, and people rested inside it, undisturbed, unobservant, content to let the unseen pass without question. As the night moved toward its final stillness, nothing changed suddenly. There was no signal, no closing moment. Sleep simply continued, deep and even, like water that had stopped moving enough to notice. Dreams, if they were still present at all, had become so light they could no longer be separated from rest itself. People, long ago, did not think of this moment as the end of dreaming. They did not think of it as anything. Thought had loosened completely. Awareness had dimmed to the point where it no longer turned back on itself. The mind was quiet without trying to be quiet. In this depth, dreams were not images, not feelings, not movements. They were absence, not an empty absence, but a full one. A fullness without shape, the kind that does not ask to be filled. This was the state people trusted most, even if they never named it. A night that reached this place felt complete. Nothing more was required from it. Nothing needed to be carried forward. The night had held everything and released it gently. As the first light began to return, there was no abrupt crossing. Waking did not arrive all at once. The body stirred slightly. Breathing changed. Awareness returned slowly, without urgency. Dreams did not resist this return. They did not linger. They slipped away without sound, without leaving a trace. People woke, not feeling guided or instructed, but settled. The mind felt clear not because it understood something, but because it had been allowed to rest fully. Dreams had passed through when needed and stayed away when not. Both had been enough. There was no sense of loss in forgetting. Forgetting was part of the design. Dreams were never meant to stay. They belonged to the night, and the night had passed. As people rose and moved into their days, they did not feel followed by the darkness. Sleep had closed behind them cleanly. Whatever had happened in the night had completed itself without asking for attention. In this way, long ago, dreams found their quiet ending, not as mysteries solved, not as meanings revealed, but as gentle companions that walked beside sleep. For a while, and then stepped away. They asked nothing. They explained nothing. They simply passed, and the world continued, calm and familiar, carrying forward only the softness left behind by a mind that had been allowed, for a few hours, to rest, without needing to understand anything at all.